Our marriage teetered on the edge of collapse from financial fights, until we embraced vulnerability, shared our truths, and created a vision board that healed our trust and transformed our future. I'm Alex, 33, originally from New York City, currently living just outside Manhattan. I work in digital marketing, nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me a stable routine. I met Mia 5 years ago at a friend's birthday dinner. She was 29 then, working in fashion retail and full of energy. Our chemistry was instant, and we were officially a couple within 2 months. From the beginning, we seemed compatible in all the ways that mattered. Shared humor, similar values, and long conversations that stretched into the early morning. Within a year, we moved in together into a decent apartment in Brooklyn. We weren't rich by any means, but our combined income allowed us to live comfortably. But it wasn't long before subtle differences started surfacing. Mia was spontaneous, carefree with money. She loved shopping, clothes, home decor, little weekend getaways. She'd say things like, "You can't take it with you," while I leaned toward budgeting, saving, and investing. At first, I brushed it off. We were still figuring each other out. Eventually, we got married. It was a modest wedding, my idea. I wanted to avoid unnecessary debt. She agreed, at least outwardly, but I noticed her disappointment when we didn't rent the rooftop venue she had once bookmarked. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed we were aligned, that love would bridge the small differences. I now realize how naive that was. In retrospect, the signs were there. Quiet moments where she'd scroll through designer handbags online while I reviewed our monthly expenses. It felt minor, but those quiet moments grew louder over time. Something was coming, and I wasn't ready. After our honeymoon glow faded, the first real tension appeared in our shared budget review one Saturday morning. Mia and I sat at the small kitchen table, me with a spreadsheet open on my laptop, her with a latte in hand. I began listing our fixed expenses: rent, utilities, groceries, savings contributions. She nodded, sipping calmly. Then I pointed to the discretionary column: dining out, entertainment, shopping. I asked gently if she could cap her monthly fun spending at a certain amount so we could boost our emergency fund. She sighed, closed her eyes for a moment, and agreed. But later that day, I discovered a series of online orders: 2 new coats, shoes for her sister's birthday, a designer candle set. The total blew past the cap we discussed. My chest tightened. This wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I spent hours replaying our conversation, wondering if I'd been too rigid. Maybe she didn't think the cap applied to gifts or treat-yourself days. But the numbers on the bank statement didn't lie. By mid-month, we were tapping into our grocery and utilities funds just to cover her extras. And I was the one who ended up scrounging for spare change when the heat bill landed. That evening, I sat alone scrolling through our joint account history. Anxiety buzzed in my veins. Our savings goal for the down payment on a small condo, my dream, was slipping away. I thought about my parents, who had sacrificed everything to buy their first home. I remembered their relief and pride when they finally held the keys. I felt torn. I loved Mia's spontaneity, her joy in the little luxuries, yet I feared those luxuries would derail the life I'd planned. I closed my laptop, my heart heavy with unspoken worry. The budget was more than numbers. It was the blueprint of our future, and right now, that blueprint was cracking. I resolved to address our growing imbalance before resentment set in. The following Sunday, I prepared a simple proposal: maintain our joint account for shared expenses, then split our personal spending into separate fund accounts. I envisioned clarity, a clear line between rent, bills, and our individual choices. I printed a chart and laid it out on a coffee table, hoping the visual would help. Mia glanced at the chart, her expression unreadable. She nodded slowly, but I sensed hesitation. A week later, when our first fund contributions were due, she transferred less than her agreed share. When I reminded her, she shrugged and said she'd cover it later. A week turned into 2. No transfer came. Meanwhile, she continued ordering things I couldn't immediately identify: scented diffusers, artisanal skincare, hobby supplies she claimed she'd use soon. Despite my frustration, I tried empathy. I recalled how liberating it felt when she surprised me with a spontaneous weekend trip to the Catskills, how her enthusiasm brightened even my stress-filled days. I reminded myself we were both adults with different habits and histories. I thought a brief journal entry might help her see the impact of her choices. So I wrote a heartfelt note, expressing how money worries kept me awake at night, how I missed the carefree laughter we once shared without the shadow of an overdraft. That evening, I left the note on her pillow and slipped away to work late, hoping to let her digest my words. But when I returned, the note was gone and our apartment felt colder. In the silence, I realized compromise wasn't a one-time discussion. It required ongoing trust. And trust, once strained, demands more than spreadsheets and charts. It demands vulnerability, patience, and perhaps a willingness to rethink everything we thought we knew about us. Weeks passed with an uneasy tension hovering between us. I noticed subtle shifts. Mia would pause mid-laugh when I walked into the room, or glance at her phone screen before stepping away. I wanted to press further about the budget, but every time I opened my mouth, her wary expression stopped me. Our living room, once filled with light and music, felt stiflingly quiet. One evening, our electricity was cut off due to an overdue bill. I'd forgotten to schedule the automatic payment in my attempt to track every dollar manually. Mia returned from work to find only the dim glow of candles. She seemed apologetic, but I sensed something deeper, perhaps relief at seeing a direct consequence of our financial discord. As the wax melted into rivulets on the coffee table, I realized our unspoken frustrations were burning holes in our relationship. We were both suffering. I wrestled with guilt over my rigid budgeting. She wrestled with feeling controlled. Neither of us trusted the other enough to bridge that gap. I spent the night drafting a new message, an apology for my harshness and a plea for open conversation. But when morning came, I hesitated. Words felt inadequate against weeks of accumulation. Late payments, hidden purchases, sleepless nights. Instead, I decided to seek counsel elsewhere. I reached out anonymously to a financial coach online. I laid out our story, confessed my fears of resentment poisoning our marriage, and asked for guidance. The coach's response arrived the next day. Focus on aligning values before dollars. Begin by sharing financial histories and dreams, not statements. That advice resonated. I printed our tax returns from the past 2 years, listed major milestones, Mia's promotion, my freelance bonuses, and under each, the emotions I'd felt: pride, anxiety, hope. I slid the folder onto the kitchen counter, heart pounding with both dread and determination. This time, I vowed I wouldn't let silence be the luxury we both could no longer afford. That evening, I invited Mia to join me at the kitchen island without mentioning the papers. She arrived, curious, and I offered her a cup of herbal tea. I cleared a space and placed the folder between us. Inside were our tax returns, pay stubs, and a timeline of expenses from the past 2 years. Each document had a handwritten note, milestones, and the emotions I tied to them. Pride when Mia earned her promotion, fear when I lost a client and dipped in his savings, excitement when we splurged on our first weekend getaway, regret when I had to borrow for groceries. Mia flipped through the pages silently. I braced myself, fearing anger or withdrawal. Instead, a soft nod. She pointed to the section where my note described anxiety over bills. I closed my eyes, imagining the weight of my worry now visible on paper. Then she reached the part where I described her joy at spontaneous treats. I saw her pause, as though realizing how those moments had conflicted with my constant caution. It wasn't a heated confrontation. It felt like peeling back layers, exposing the raw truths we'd both been withholding. Mia exhaled deeply and placed her hand on the folder. For the first time in weeks, I felt a crack in the wall between us. We weren't on opposite sides anymore. We were standing at the same table, looking at the same story. While nothing was resolved that night, I accepted that this openness was our first real step toward understanding. The numbers, once a source of silent contention, had become a bridge. And though I still feared what lay ahead, I felt a spark of hope that we could rebuild our trust, one document, one emotion at a time. After a shared review, I felt cautious optimism. Over the next week, Mia and I worked side by side to draft a revised budget that balanced our needs. We agreed to a flexible, fun fund, tiered by month, allowing her occasional splurges without derailing our goals. I allocated a small buffer for unexpected treats, and she offered to join me in setting up automatic transfers to our savings target. Initially, the new plans seemed promising. Mia tracked her spending in an app, sending me occasional screenshots of her purchases. Today's art supplies, last night's concert ticket, a midweek coffee treat. I reciprocated by summarizing our joint expenses each weekend, highlighting how close we were to our emergency fund milestone. For a brief period, tension eased. I noticed her smile return when she checked off her budgeted items, and I felt proud when our savings account crept upward. Yet old habits die slowly. 2 weeks in, I discovered charges for a boutique workout class series and a designer phone case, items that nudged us near our discretionary limit. Normally, I would have panicked and confronted her, but this time I paused. I remembered the financial coach's advice to treat slip-ups as data, not disasters. I added the unplanned purchases to our monthly review, adjusting next month's allocation to accommodate them without judgment. Still, I sensed a shift in Mia's demeanor. Her excitement at sharing expenses waned. Those budget screenshots stopped coming. She began declining my weekend check-ins, citing busy days. I recognized the unease of being monitored, though I intended only transparency. Instead of easing into partnership, I risked reviving old resentments. Late one night, I closed my laptop feeling the same knot of anxiety returned. I realized that rebuilding trust meant more than numbers or apps. It required honoring each other's autonomy while protecting our shared future. I resolved to find a balance between oversight and freedom, to keep the conversation alive rather than letting silence slip back in. The real test of our new plan wasn't the budget itself, but our willingness to adapt when it faltered. I could feel the strain returning, this time beneath the surface. I realized that our conflict wasn't just about numbers, but about deeper insecurities. One Saturday afternoon, I watched Mia scroll through sale alerts on her phone. Instead of impatience, I felt empathy stirring. I remembered the stories she'd once shared about growing up in a household where financial scarcity was constant. Spending had been her way to claim control, to fill an emotional void left by unpredictable budgets and unpaid bills. That evening, I sat on the couch with my own thoughts. I pictured her younger self, anxious when money ran out, relieved when a treat appeared. In that light, her spontaneous purchases were less about disregard for our goals and more about a coping mechanism born of fear. I stared at our muted TV and realized that what she needed wasn't stricter limits, but compassion and security. The next morning, I drafted a simple note, acknowledgement of her past, and an invitation to share how money made her feel safe. I placed it on her breakfast plate before she woke. My heart pounded, uncertain if she would respond. When I returned home hours later, the note was gone. On the counter lay a different card, handwritten, delicate, that thanked me for recognizing her history and offered a glimpse into how saving together might feel like loss rather than assurance. Reading her words, I understood that our financial disagreement mirrored our emotional disconnect. We were both seeking safety, she through familiar spending habits, I through rigorous saving. The question now was how to create a shared sense of security that honored both our needs. I closed her card, determined to transform our budget into a place of mutual understanding rather than silent fear. I realized we needed more than budgets and spreadsheets. We needed a vision of what security felt like for both of us. That Sunday morning, I gathered art supplies, poster board, color markers, printed photos of places we dreamed of visiting, and cutouts of homes we both admired. In the quiet of our living room, I spread everything on the floor and titled the board, Our Future Together. Mia emerged from the bedroom, surprised but curious. Without a word, I handed her the poster board and a marker. I began arranging images. A cozy Brooklyn brownstone, a sunlit kitchen where we'd host friends, a seaside town for retirement. Under each picture, I wrote one word: stability, adventure, comfort. Across the top, I penciled a shared motto: building security, embracing joy. She studied the board, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and then chose a cut out of Vineyard Getaway we'd once discussed. She placed it near adventure and wrote beneath it, spontaneity. I smiled inwardly, heart swelling as I realized she was investing in this exercise. Over the next hour, we silently added bits and pieces. Her favorite cafe for date nights, my preferred index fund charts, our goal of 6 months savings in the bank. By afternoon, the vision board stood complete, bright, personal, and balanced between her desires and mine. It wasn't a binding contract. It was a living promise. I felt relief wash over me. This board represented more than financial targets. It encapsulated mutual respect and empathy, a space where saving and spending could coexist harmoniously. Later that night, I caught Mia tracing the word comfort with her fingertip. I realized that our journey wasn't just about numbers. It was about creating shared meaning. In that moment, I knew we had taken a significant step toward lasting unity, one crafted not from rigid rules but from shared dreams. In the weeks after creating our vision board, I noticed a lighter atmosphere around money. Mia laughed when I reminded her of our beachfront art studio goal, and I felt genuine pride as our savings inched upward. Yet one evening, I checked our joint account balance and froze an unexpected expense, a weekend spa retreat charge to our fund that exceeded her allotted amount by nearly $300. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. This wasn't a minor overshoot. It threatened our 6-month safety net. Instead of immediately confronting Mia, I replayed our agreement. We'd acknowledge slip-ups as data, not disasters. I reminded myself that trust required patience. Still, the surge of disappointment and anxiety made my hands tremble. I spent a restless night drafting my response, torn between calling her out and letting the issue simmer. By morning, I decided to transform the budget again into a learning tool. I collected our account printouts from the past month, highlighting the retreat charge in bright red and circling the small overages from earlier weeks. Beneath the numbers, I wrote reflections on how unplanned expenses threatened our shared security. When Mia came home, she found the annotated pages on the kitchen table. I watched her reaction in silence as she examined the red circles and read my notes. Her expression was unreadable. In that quiet moment, I felt the weight of our vulnerability, how easy it was to drift back into old patterns, and how precious it was to remain aligned. That night, I lay awake considering the setback. The vision board still hung on the wall, its images of comfort and adventure beckoning. I knew that our greatest test wasn't avoiding mistakes. It was responding when they happened. Tomorrow, I resolved we would sit down again, not to assign blame, but to reinforce our commitment to both security and spontaneity. Because our future depended on more than plans. It depended on forgiveness and the resilience to try again. The next morning, I brewed 2 cups of coffee and set the annotated account sheets alongside the vision board. I invited Mia into the living room. Her eyes met mine with a flicker of apprehension, but she nodded. I began last night. I realized that our plan needs regular check-ins, not just big conversations. I pointed to the red-circled retreat charge. This is okay, as data. We learn from it. But I want us to discuss how to adjust so it doesn't jeopardize our security net. Mia took a slow breath and reached for the retreat charge note. I forgot how much I spent, she admitted softly. I got caught up in the moment. I acknowledged her honesty and reminded her of our shared motto: building security, embracing joy. We spent the next hour revisiting our fun tiers. Mia suggested adding a bonus buffer for spontaneous splurges, an extra $100 that could roll over if unused. I countered by proposing a safety check threshold. If any month's overspend exceeded 10% of the fund, we'd revisit the board together and reallocate. She agreed, and we updated our spreadsheet with the new rules. Then we reaffirmed our shared goals: the down payment target, emergency cushion, and that art studio weekend. As we spoke, the tension in her shoulders eased, and I felt our teamwork strengthen. By the end, we each voiced a commitment. Mine, to remain open and flexible. Hers, to notify me if she sensed she might overspend. We sealed it with a high five that turned into a spontaneous hug, laughter easing the last of the anxiety from my chest. Walking to my home office afterward, I realized that cooperation wasn't a destination, but an ongoing choice. And as long as we kept choosing each other, we could navigate any financial storm. A month later, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. A local art collective was hosting a weekend artist residency in Montauk, with room and board covered plus a small stipend. It seemed perfect for Mia's passion and aligned with our vision board's adventure and creativity goals. The residency fee was modest, but would require tapping into our fun bonus buffer. I hesitated, recalling our recent overspend and the fragile progress we'd made. Yet I recognized this wasn't an impulse purchase. It was an intentional opportunity that nourished Mia's growth and our shared dreams. I sat at my desk, balancing the numbers, using the $100 rollover buffer, reallocating a portion of next month's fund, and still keeping our emergency target on track. That evening, I quietly printed the residency information and the recalculated budget, then placed both gently on the kitchen counter. I felt a flutter of excitement and nervousness. This decision symbolized more than money. It was a test of our new trust. When Mia discovered the paperwork, her eyes lit up. Rather than immediately saying yes, she examined the budget, saw how we could make it work, and nodded with gratitude. I realized then that our plan's flexibility had become its greatest strength. We weren't just reacting to setbacks. We were seizing opportunities together. We submitted her application that night. As I closed my laptop, I felt a warm sense of partnership. Our shared finances had evolved from a battleground of fear and control into a collaborative tool for living the life we envisioned. No longer was money a barrier. It was a bridge to experiences that mattered. And with that shift, I knew we were stronger than ever, ready to embrace both security and spontaneity as co-pilots on our journey. When Mia received the acceptance email, excitement rippled through our apartment. The residency offered her creative immersion, and I felt proud that our financial teamwork had made it possible. Yet beneath my joy lay a flutter of unease. This opportunity required us to pause our usual routines, deposits for supplies, prepaid utilities, and a slight reshuffling of our monthly budget. More than that, it meant traveling to Montauk together for the 3-day residency, away from home. I watched Mia pack her sketchbooks, easel, and carefully labeled tubes of paint. Every brush she placed in her bag reminded me of the freedom we'd built into our plan, and every coated canvas whispered the word spontaneity. I told myself that our safety net could handle the shift, and I reminded myself of our new check-in process. Still, I felt tension coil in my chest as I recalculated our post-residency funds while she zipped her bag shut. On the morning of departure, I drove us to the train station, navigating rush hour traffic while mentally running through our emergency fund balance. I repeated to myself the strategy we'd agreed upon. Treat this like any other planned splurge, adjust next month's allocations, and lean on our buffer if needed. As the train pulled away with Mia perched on a window seat, I stood on the platform alone, watching her silhouette shrink. Pride mingled with a familiar nod of worry. That night, back at our apartment, I opened our budgeting app and reviewed the projected numbers for the coming weeks. I noticed a minor misentry on one of our joint charges and corrected it, determined not to let small errors compound into distrust. Then I sat at my desk, drafting an update I would send Mia, a summary of where our finances stood, how we'd absorb the residency costs, and a reminder of our shared commitments. Typing each line, I sensed that my role had subtly shifted from budget keeper to financial partner, one who both supported our dreams and safeguarded our future. When I hit send, I leaned back with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Trust, I realized, wasn't a single act, but a continuous process of transparency, planning, and putting faith in each other, even when the path curved beyond our control. And as I closed my laptop, I felt ready to meet the pressures ahead, confident that our collaboration could weather both canvases and spreadsheets. The residency concluded late Sunday afternoon, and Mia returned home glowing with renewed energy. Her sketches brimmed with new ideas, and she chattered excitedly about future projects. Yet as I loaded her canvas portfolio into the closet, a notification pinged on my phone, a higher-than-expected utilities bill, likely from leaving the heat on during the chilly Montauk nights. It was an extra $120 charge that hadn't been in our forecast. My heart sank. Our buffer was thinning. For a moment, I considered stashing the bill aside and addressing it after the joy of Mia's return faded. But I remembered how hiding details had once widened the rift between us. So I grabbed the bill and walked to the living room, where Mia was pinning new inspiration images above her drafting table. Mia, I began gently, holding out the bill. We've got this extra charge from utilities. Looks like the heater ran a lot. Our buffer's smaller now, and I want us to adjust the plan before next month. She turned, curiosity mixing with concern. Oh, I didn't realize, she said, eyes softening at the surprise cost. I nodded. No blame, just data. Can we tweak the next allocation? Maybe pull slightly from the art supplies fund, since they haven't been used up yet? Mia agreed without hesitation. She set aside half of her upcoming supplies budget to cover the overage. Then, on her own accord, she suggested we pause that ambitious equipment upgrade she'd been eyeing until after our emergency fund reached the 6-month mark. Her quick response made something shift in me. This wasn't the defensive withdrawal of old. It was genuine partnership. Later, as we reviewed the revised spreadsheet, I felt both relief and pride. We had navigated an unplanned expense not by finger-pointing, but by problem-solving together. Our finances, once a source of conflict, had become a testament to our mutual respect. That night, I realized that weathering the unexpected was about more than numbers. It was about knowing we face surprises as a united front. And in that unity, I found a deeper trust than any budget line could quantify. In the weeks that followed, our renewed sense of partnership became my anchor. Each morning, I checked our budgeting app before coffee, not out of anxiety, but to acknowledge our progress. Our emergency cushion ticked upward, and even our fund balance showed modest growth. Yet I recognized that stability could breed complacency, so I consciously looked for ways to reinforce our financial foundation, and by extension, our relationship. I decided to revisit our long-term goals. Drawing from our vision board's comfort section, I drafted a timeline for our condo down payment. Milestones for every quarter, accompanied by small celebratory rituals, like cooking a special meal or taking a sunset walk. I printed the schedule and slipped it into the folder where we kept our project documents. Meanwhile, Mia approached me with her own initiative. She'd researched credit unions offering higher savings interest and discussed the possibility of opening a dedicated account for our emergency fund. Her proactive suggestion thrilled me. It meant she fully owned our shared plans. I helped her compare rates and read terms carefully, appreciating her diligence and the way she had grown into a confident financial partner. As we set up the new account together, I felt a surge of gratitude. Our early struggles, overdrafts, hidden purchases, silent nights, had taught us invaluable lessons in communication and trust. Now, as we solidified our future, those lessons felt woven into every decision we made. That evening, I placed the updated timeline next to our vision board. The images of our dream brownstone, the coastal art studio, and our retirement haven seemed to glow brighter. I understood then that maintaining our financial harmony required more than reactive fixes. It demanded proactive nurturing. Our journey was not about eliminating all mistakes, but about building rituals, feedback loops, and shared victories. In doing so, we transformed money from a source of conflict into a cornerstone of our unity. And I knew that together, we were ready for whatever came next. Months have passed since our most turbulent days. Our condo down payment fund surpassed the halfway mark, and our emergency cushion now truly covers 6 months of expenses. More importantly, Mia and I have cultivated a rhythm of openness. Weekly check-ins, shared celebrations for each milestone, and an unspoken understanding that financial discussions are acts of care, not conflict. Last weekend, we strolled through a prospective brownstone open house, sunlight streaming through high ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked with character. As we dreamed aloud about converting the attic into Mia's art studio and dedicating a corner for my home office, I felt a swell of gratitude. We laughed about our early fights over budget caps and overspending, marveling at how those challenges propelled us toward deeper connection. That night, we returned home and updated our vision board, adding a postcard of that brownstone and a handwritten note. Moving in spring 2026. We toasted with homemade cocktails, her idea, mine for buying the ingredients on sale, and toasted to our partnership. No spreadsheets were opened. Instead, we reveled in the story we'd written together. I realized then that financial compatibility isn't about matching spending habits perfectly, but about aligning values, communicating honestly, and adapting when life shifts. Our journey transformed money from an adversary into a tool for building dreams. In the end, it wasn't the numbers that defined us, but the trust and respect we fostered along the way. As I drift to sleep that night, I feel calm and hopeful. Whatever challenges lie ahead, career changes, unexpected expenses, or new adventures, I know Mia and I will face them together. Our foundation is no longer just a balance sheet, but a shared commitment to choosing each other every day.